Hi, welcome to another episode of the Feel Good Marketing Podcast. I'm Merissa Davis, Clementine's Creative Director, and I'm joined today with Jennifer Nelson, Managing Director. Hey, Jennifer.
Hey there.
So it's hard to believe that we're approaching the end of a year and annual planning season begins.
Yeah, how did that happen?
I don't know. Every year we say that, don't we? Planning is a process that can take up a lot of time, and it's very tempting to skip it, but I think it's an incredibly important part of to review your current marketing plan and make sure your strategy moving forward is intact.
Yeah, I mean, having that documented plan really is what allows you to stay focused on your goals throughout the year. So, you kind of know where you're headed and you know what you're doing to get there. And it's also really important to allow you to plan the resources that you're going to need to get where you want to go in the coming year, and to do that with consistency in your marketing programs. And, implementing your programs with consistency is so important. And planning is really a critical part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for a lot of people, planning can be very intimidating, very overwhelming. So where would you suggest that somebody begins?
Yeah, I mean, I think planning is an intimidating process for a lot of people, but I think it doesn't have to be complicated and it doesn't have to be a big production, but there are some key things that you can do, to make sure that you're headed in the right direction. And I think the first thing that's really important is just to take a little bit of time and take stock of where you are. Things move really quickly. They change really quickly. The markets are changing really quickly. And obviously everyone is busy. And so life is moving really quickly. So it's a great opportunity to just carve out that time to take a minute, look up from what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and figure out, what's happening in the market, what changes are going on. Are there new challenges you need to be thinking about? Are there maybe new opportunities you could be taking advantage of, and also what is your competition doing and how are you doing in comparison to them and how can you really set yourself apart? So just taking that little bit of time to kind of assess the market and your place in it is a great place to start.
Yeah, it's kind of like looking backward is the best way to think forward, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And tracking and metrics are something that we talk a lot about. So hopefully you have a lot of results from the previous year that you can get a good sense of, where you are and chart a course forward from there.
So, I assume that part of taking stock in where you've been includes reviewing your audience.
Yeah. Target audience is key when you're doing anything on the marketing front. It's all about connecting with that audience and really resonating with that audience. So I think there's two things to think about here. One, if you've never really been through the exercise of defining that target audience, this is the opportunity to do that, to really spend some time thinking through and documenting who is the audience that you're trying to reach. There may be, multiple audiences that you're trying to reach. If you've never gone through the process of creating like personas for your target audience, that can be a really helpful exercise to help you kind of focus in and key in on what the critical items are in terms of connecting with your target market. And then on the flip side of that, if you have done all of those things, I think it's easy to be tempted to say, I know my target market.
This is who they are.
I know them.
We've done this before.
But again, things change quickly, and things may have changed for your audience. So it may be the same people that you're talking to, but those people may not be in the same situation or looking for the same solutions that they were a year ago. So it's a good time to just check in and make sure that you have really up-to-date understanding and insight into your audience and how you're serving them and connecting with them.
Sure. So once you've adjusted your audience and kind of done a review of where you stand within the market, then it's really time to start setting those goals, right?
Goal setting is really important.
It's the most fun part.
It can be the most fun part. Some people, again, avoid this. I think it's hard. It's one of those exercises. Sometimes you just have to force yourself to sit down and go through. But we always say, if you don't define the destination, then how are you ever going to know when you've reached it?
Right. Yeah.
So you have to have some idea of what you're aiming at. And setting really specific goals in terms of where you're trying to go and how you're going to measure the performance along the way, is what really lets you plan appropriately for the resources you're going to need and improve the results that you're getting.
Really chart that course moving forward.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So in speaking about goals, a lot of people like to talk about SMART goals. And a lot of people have probably heard of SMART goals, but they might not necessarily know what that means. So SMART goals stands for specific, goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound.
That's right. SMART goals, that's a great way to kind of use as a guideline to set goals that can actually be helpful for you. So instead of saying, I want to do more on social media this year, the SMART goal version of that might be, I want to improve the click-through rate on my social media ads to 3% by the end of the second quarter. Well, that's a lot more defined. It's a lot more specific. There are particular actions that you can match with that and actually do something about it. Whereas, you may have in your mind, like, well, I need to do more with the social media thing, but what does that really mean? And if you don't have a specific plan, then, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think the other thing about SMART goals is that they are easily trackable over time. So you can tell where you've been and how well you're progressing through to reaching your goals by your set time.
Yeah. Tracking and metrics are your friend, contrary to popular opinion.
So speaking of doing something about it, once you've set your goals, then you need to really start planning action items and tactics to accompany those goals so that you can set your course and go. One example of that, would be if your goal is to boost lead generation on your website by 10%, then maybe you set action items like adjusting your contact form accordingly, updating your calls to action to really jump them over to the contact form, and creating new landing pages based on lead generation. Yeah.
And all of those, again, are really specific actions that are easy to define, easy for you to figure out what it's going to take you to get there. And you can, set timing with all of those things. So I think that it dovetails underneath your SMART goals very nicely. I think the other thing to keep in mind when you start talking about tactics and action items is to be willing to explore new things that are out there. Sometimes we get a little bit of tunnel vision and we keep doing what we've been doing because you know how to do it. But as the markets change, as things change for your audience, things like that, particularly in digital marketing, things change really quickly. There's always new tools available. There's new platforms available. And there may be something out there now that could be really powerful in terms of helping you achieve the goals that you're going after that maybe wasn't that a year ago. So it's a good time to sort of think outside the box a little bit. Things like native advertising and different kinds of content marketing are really on the rise, and a lot of brands are finding those to be very effective. Depending on who you are, maybe it's time to try out TikTok.
Maybe.
Who knows?
So we've figured out where we currently stand, where we're headed, and how we plan to get there. Let's talk about the bottom line. Everybody's favorite budget.
Yes, bottom line time always arrives. So, you have to set an appropriate budget for all of these goals and action items. That's one of the reasons why where the A in SMART becomes really important, because they have to be attainable, right? Budgeting obviously is going to be this marriage between what you want to accomplish and what's realistic from a budgeting perspective. But once you've gone through the exercise of setting those really specific goals and setting all of those action items that go with them, then it's very easy to go through that and, figure out exactly what each one of those takes to accomplish. So it actually can allow you to budget with a lot more accuracy, to fulfill the plan that you're putting together.
That sounds smart to me.
Pretty smart.
So one thing people may overlook while they're figuring out their budget is the time that it takes to actually achieve everything on your actions list.
Yeah. Time is a limited resource, just like dollars and other things. And sometimes it is one of the most limited resources. So it's really important to take into account time when you're thinking about setting goals, but also when you're thinking about budgeting. Do you have time to accomplish all of these things yourself, or are you going to have to outsource certain items? Are there items that are require special expertise, again, that you're going to have to outsource or hire for. And those things are costs that you need to take into account when you're considering the overall budget that it's going to take to get you where you want to go.
So once you've set your plan in place and started that train down the track, then you really need to start tracking your progress over time.
Yeah. No marketing plan should be a set it and forget it kind of exercise. And I think this is another one of the things that people, it's very tempting to skip. You have a lot of things going on, and it's hard sometimes to carve out the time to track. But while we talk about annual plans, but you really should be touching in with these goals on a much more frequent basis than that. And tracking and checking in on that, when you've defined the metrics to go with each one of your action items, you should be looking at those on a regular basis so that you can understand how you're performing. And so you have time to make adjustments as you need to reach your goals,
right,
rather than, waiting for a whole another year to go by and then, be surprised at the end by when you pull the results and see where you are.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the end of this episode. And I hope that you will not wait a whole year to go by before watching the rest of our Feel Good podcast episodes. Anywhere that you find your podcasts, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Thanks so much.